as an exporter, next slide, please. As an exporter, what are the various steps you need to go through to make a good job of actually exporting to the US? So I put down six different stages. The first stage is, and I won't go into too much detail, but just try and list them for you now, and then we'll discuss each stage as it comes. First stage, obviously, is market research, to learn about the market you want to target. Secondly, have a marketing plan. Thirdly, look at all the regulatory and compliance issues. Things like, have you properly registered? Have you got the necessary approvals? Do you have social compliance, and so on and so forth? Thirdly, when you've now sorted out your business, then are you able to identify a customer, woo that customer and bring them on board? And then once you've wooed them, will you be able to support them with the necessary product customized to their requirements? Will you be able to produce it, pack it, and then dispatch it on the ship through whichever logistics, and then finally to the export destination, with the full intention, of course, that you will build a relationship with that customer and eventually expand and even diversify into new markets and new products. So to me, that would be the pathway from when you have your initial idea to the time you actually come to fruition of your intention by having actually exported. Next slide, please. So coming to step number one, which we call market research. It's a very important step which some people overlook, and it's something which fortunately nowadays is relatively easier to do than it used to be. And the access to accurate and relevant information to help you to plan and make decisions for your export business is vital. The data could be from public or private agencies on the US consumer and industrial markets, depending on which market you're targeting. And these market reports can actually be bought. I'm always amazed by the number and the variety of these reports. I'll just give you some few names, and be advised, I'm not marketing any particular one. I'm just trying to show you there's a range. There are probably 30 more than the ones I've shown you here. But that's a range of the kind of firms you'll get: Euromonitor, Modo, Intelligence, IBIS World, Grand View Research, and so on and so forth. And one called Statista, which has very, very interesting statistics, put in very, very user-friendly ways. The only warning here is that one subscription can cost you several $1,000s. The cheapest I've seen is about $500, but the bulk of them are $3,000 and so it's quite expensive for a single entrepreneur. But sometimes when you get the report, it's actually worth the money that you'll pay for it. The other way you can go about it is to use market research firms who collect customized information for you in line with what your needs are as an exporter. Maybe the standard surveys that are already there and being hashed by these other firms are not suitable for you. So you can commission somebody who will do that market research for you. In some countries within our region, you have national export promotion agencies who have the wherewithal, the resources, and the trained manpower to actually commission some research surveys for you, for your sector. So I think before you jump into buying these other studies, maybe find out, has your national body actually done this study for you? So if you're trying to export, I don't know, mangoes, I don't know if that's a good suggestion, mangoes to the US, has there been a study done by anybody else to do that? Yeah, and last but not least, there are a couple of studies that were done in the past by various development partners, not least by USAID, and I have one in particular I mentioned, a footwear study that was done in November 2020, looking at the end market for footwear. It was specifically for East Africa, but I think the principles apply. The last aspect of market research is to go to the US if you can yourself. Having done all this other stuff, go and see. Go and see for yourself, visit the shops, visit the producers, manufacturers, the retailers, and everybody in the value chain that concerns you. Even meet some consumers, even competitors. Attend trade shows, and just generally be around to get a flavor of how the business is, what the prospects are, and a more detailed in-depth analysis of the market and its requirements. So I'll just give you an example of some market research that, next slide, that was done for the footwear sector that we mentioned earlier. And if you're looking at a market like the US, you want to understand the size of that market. You want to understand who else go to the next slide. You want to understand who else is in that market in terms of who are your competitors, alternate suppliers. You also want to understand how much are these other players, if you look at yourself as a country, able to supply vis-a-vis what you can. And then also try and understand how the trends have been year on year. Is this particular country's supply increasing or is it decreasing? So you can get most of this information from, in some cases, US government sites and US government sources. So for instance, if you're looking at footwear, footwear falls under the purview of an organization or a division, a department called the Office of Textiles and Apparel, or OTEXA for short. Next slide, please. So OTEXA, what it does is, in addition to many things, OTEXA actually supports the collection of data on certain sectors that it has jurisdiction over. So apparel is one of them. And then the others include footwear, luggage, and so on. So what OTEXA does is they periodically compile the data from, I think, the Census Bureau, and they put it in a way that you can actually see how the shippers from different countries are doing. So this is, the slide, I don't know if you missed the slide, slide number 12, I think. If you go back to slide number 12, but anyway, I'll just explain. It shows that we have $33.4 billion as the total footwear imports into the US in the year 2022. And of this, about 14 million was accounted for by China, 13 or 14 million. And under that, we also have Vietnam following close behind at about 11, and then Indonesia, and therefore. And if you coalesce all the AGOA countries together, Sub-Saharan African countries, we were able to produce 8 million, not 8 billion, but 8 million. So you can see we have quite a ways to go. So that kind of data is available. And I would encourage each of you after this meeting, if you're in the apparel sector or footwear or the other goods, you can please go and see what you can do with the data that's available and that's free to you. Also in the US, we talk about the buyers. We know who is supplying, well, not the firms, but the countries, but who are the buyers? So some of the big buyers are Nike, who we all know, Foot Locker, Skechers, Caleras, and then Wolverine World. But there's so many others. And they belong to, many of them belong to trade associations. And it would be good over time if you can become familiar with those trade associations and maybe even join and read their newsletters. And then that way you'll get current market information about what's going on. Now, as you explore the US market, one of the things that you can do is look at the different segments that operate in that country. You can segment in different ways. But one very interesting development, I think, in the footwear market is the fact that leather shoes, the consumption of leather shoes has gone down. It had started dropping even before COVID, but during COVID, a lot of people didn't used to go to work. They used to work from home. So they didn't bother to buy any leather shoes because they weren't worn out. And therefore they started wearing, Vans or whatever, slippers in the house or sandals. And so that kind of became a trend. So the number of leather shoes that are being purchased every year has actually gone into decline. And they currently have about 28% market share, but they're expected to go down by about 2.5% per annum in market share up until 2025. Meanwhile, there's been a very big uptick in the use of what you call athleisure products. This includes sneakers. And I'm sure many of you have seen, very strangely to me anyway, but you find a wedding where the groom and the bride are both wearing sneakers, or they go for a big event and then they're both wearing sneakers. So sneakers are like a fashion statement, and people are willing to pay good sums of money for these sneakers. And it's really not because they want to engage in sports, it's because of the look. So the form is more important than the function. So that's a very high growth sector. It's currently about 23% of the market and expected to grow at just under 8%. And then another category is what you call athletic footwear. These are type of shoes which are designed to perform a function. So if you're playing golf, there's a particular shape of the heel shape of the sole and, the leather and so how it fits. If you're an athlete running, a marathon, there's a particular type of shoe. So there is a growing demand for these specialized shoes which fit a very specific function. And last but not least, and they're also very pricey, last but not least is these other shoes everybody was wearing during COVID, which are casual, everyday, multi-purpose, and which actually now gaining market share. They're at least 1/3 of the total shoes which are sold in the US. So we expect to see the US market for footwear change. And this is not surprising, but it's something that if you're in the footwear business, you need to know where is the market going. So we expect the future trends to be also indicative of a preference for eco-friendly shoes. And many consumers are willing to pay the extra money. So using recycled materials or materials which have been processed with minimal impact on the environment. And something very interesting is that technology is allowing customization of mass-produced products. So the mass production is in the basic manufacturing, but at the finishing level, a customer can walk into the shop and say, no, I want laces which are bright green, or I want a sole that's bright yellow or something. So people are able to customize their particular shoes based on technology, including digital printing, in a way that helps them to give feedback and to give their opinion as a consumer. So I think I'll stop there on the issue of what the trends are in the market, but suffice it to say there are very many events that coalesce around any sector. And if you are going to be in the US, I would really recommend that you attend at least one trade show a year if you're able. And there are a number of trade shows which are for footwear. I'll list them in the presentation when you get it. But it's really good because that's when you get a real feel of what the market is doing, where it's going, and really what the products in the market, what products could do well in the market, and you can decide whether you really want to produce those ones. So the next sector I'm going to look at, I don't know if we were able to move on with the slides, never mind, is food. And we all have to eat at some point. Okay, before I go to food, I'd just like to remind you that the Africa Trade Platform, which is one of the organizers and sponsors of today's event, they have a wonderful, wonderful platform where you can meet buyers. If you're a seller and if you're a buyer, you can meet sellers. You can create a free account as a legitimate business. You submit all the required documentation, including the director's ID and the company's registration documents. You can then upload products which you want to market to US buyers on that particular bid. And if you're a buyer, you can also indicate the products you'd like to buy. And ATP will assist you, that's the Africa Trade Platform, will assist you with structuring your deals. You can also get access to trade finance to support your deals as you're going along. So it's advisable that you try and get on this platform. Go check it out. The website is there, africatradeplatform.com. Please go and check it out. And in addition, they also have verified logistics suppliers who help your products get back to the US or go from the US to Africa. So that's a fantastic opportunity. Please make sure you take advantage of it. Now, coming back to the subject, the next sector that you could look at, for instance, is specialty food. Okay, yeah, thank you, it's back. If you could skip like 4 slides ahead. So specialty food is an interesting word. You'll stop where you see some spices. Yeah. So basically, there's an organization called the US, that's it. Yeah, organization called the US Specialty Food Association. And they gave a definition of this particular segment of food and food ingredients. So they say that a specialty food is one that commands a premium price because it has superior value appeal for one or more of the following: either quality ingredients, sensory appeal, taste, texture, color, aroma, presentation, its packaging and the wrapping involved, and then also its distribution. Where is it positioned? Is it in a high-end store, in the high-end part of the high-end store, or is it in a specialist grocery where certain only certain products are available and they're positioned and presented in a particular way. So those are what you call specialty foods. So we were curious about, what can Africa provide to the US for specialty food in the specialty food category. So there's a list that follows on of some of the products which could be eligible, which could fit in that category. They include dried spices and herbs, fruit juices and fruit juice concentrates, dried fruits, honey, seeds and nuts, coconut products, the whole thing from desiccated coconut to coconut oil, condiments, preserves and jams, canned fruits and vegetables, and so on and so forth. Now, what amazed me was the size of the market. The market size, according to this association, the Specialty Food Association, is 158.4 billion as of 2021. So it's a huge amount. And amongst those categories I read out, I was very surprised to learn that condiments, preserves, and sauces, including ketchup, chili sauce, jams, jellies, that whole group, the size of the market is 22.7 billion. So it's a huge opportunity. And those are products I think we're able to provide. Canned fruits, okay, they're not as popular as they used to be for health reasons, but it's still a sizable market, 11.8 billion. Seeds and nuts, that's an area that several countries, including South Africa, Kenya, I think Tanzania, and Malawi have been successful in exporting as macadamia nut, and in the case of Tanzania and Kenya, cashew nuts. And those are doing extremely well as snack foods and also as ingredients for the bakeries and so on. And spices and herbs, amazing. I think everything that our grandparents knew about spices and herbs is being shown in science, and everybody wants to get on that bus. So if you can do good quality spices and herbs, then you can probably get something done. Last but not least is honey. The US is a major producer of honey, but it imports quite a substantial quantity of honey to supplement domestic production. So that's a product you can look at, provided your honey meets maybe the consumer palate and the packaging requirements. Okay, so looking at the entire market for specialty foods and food ingredients, we notice a steady trend in increase year on year. And we also notice a trend between organics and non-organic. Every year, the total quantity of food purchased in the US market increases, but the amount of organic food proportionately has been going up. And that's because of consumer awareness of safety and health factors that are conferred by organic foods. I don't want to say too much there, but I think all of us understand that. Now, looking at the spices as a category, we have a high level of purchase of pepper, different types of pepper. That means black pepper, white pepper, vanilla, cinnamon, saffron, and cloves. Some of these actually come from our region, including Madagascar, I think, for vanilla, Uganda for vanilla, cloves from Tanzania, I think a bit of cloves from Madagascar and so on. So there are a number of products that could be produced, and even from West Africa, certain spices and chilies and so on, and from Southern Africa as well, bird's eye chilies. So there's a whole range of things that could be exported, provided they're properly processed, dried out, and compliant with the requirements. I'm not going to go into the rest of the details. You'll read the presentation, but I think suffice it to say, with a little bit of research, you'll be able to find out opportunities for products that we could produce in our countries and export to the US. The last step in market research I'll look at is on apparel. And apparel is one of the biggest import products under AGOA. The whole US market for apparel, next, 2 more slides ahead, please. The whole US market for, keep going. There we are. The whole US market for apparel was just under $100 billion. And this was a huge jump last year, 2022, increase of 22.6%. And this is part of the post-COVID recovery. People were tired of being in the house and they said, I'm now going to buy all the clothes that I didn't buy in 2020 and 2021. So there was a huge increase in purchase of apparel, and most of that apparel is actually imported. Now for Sub-Saharan African countries, out of that close to 100 billion, we sold 1.78 billion, which is not a huge amount, but it's progress. And I think as we move along, we should be able to do even 2 or 3 times that. Exporters really need to identify the segment they want to address. We don't all have to go for mass market, low margin products. You could do just as well doing smaller runs, higher value, much more, handwork, detail work like wedding gowns, ball gowns, and those kind of things. So it's good for people to think outside the box and see which particular product they feel would give them value for money, give them a good return, and provide superior product to the customers. Next slide. In terms of next slide. In terms of who are the major players in the apparel market, obviously it's China. China is number one with 22% market share, followed by Vietnam, then Bangladesh, then India, then Indonesia, then Cambodia, and so on and so forth. So these are the major players. And it will be interesting to note that a lot of these players were actually in the GSP category. These are countries who built up. They built up their exports, they built up their industries, they built up employment using the market preferences they were given. And they've been able to transform their economies by doing that. So it's a big challenge to us to make maximum use of what we have on board. In terms of the apparel market, there are buyers, many buyers. A buyer will have a stable of several brands, by and large. They don't only hold one brand, they have a stable of brands. And then they will look for the best place to place their sourcing orders, and they will have people to manage that relationship. So you can see them there. Next slide. Abercrombie and Fish, PVH, VF, and so on and so forth. I won't go through the whole list, but those are the sort of people I think out of that list, at least 6 or 7 are already sourcing from Africa as part of benefits of AGOA for them. Yeah, an important factor for you as an apparel producer, of course, to support the US customers is to have a well-established logistics function in your company, have costing and pricing, very, very skilled management accountants who can do costing and therefore pricing, and then skilled personnel in terms of sample production, merchandising, and of course, social compliance through things like RAP. Once you can do that, then you probably have a chance to really compete and be able to get your product out there into the US market. So I'll move on. I'll try and move a bit faster and try and finish up on the pathways. So we discussed the pathways, the 6 steps. We've discussed step number 1, which was the market research. I'll go to step number 2, which is the marketing plan. And that's not very complicated. It's a normal standard marketing plan. You can look at it. It has 8 steps. You do the research, identify your audience or your target market, develop the 5, 6, 7, 8 Ps, however many Ps you want. Develop your business goals. After all, you're there to make money. Next slide. Develop your media objectives, how you're going to communicate and get sales. Do a budget and action plan. Make sure you're measuring everything, and then make sure you also have money put aside for advertising and promotion. So that's there's 8 steps to your marketing plan, and everybody has a different way of doing it. This is just the way I'm aware that it can be done. Next, the next step is, I'll skip the step on regulatory and compliance. I think it's fairly obvious, but in another seminar, I think we'll discuss the specifics for particularly the food sector, because regulatory issues become very significant. So now we're on to customer identification. So we need to identify who the customer, make sure they're buying from us. And as I mentioned, one of the ways you can do that is by going to trade shows. And you don't go to trade shows just to look at the goods. You're also going to be doing a bit of people watching, I think, at the same time. So I think I know one particular entrepreneur who used to come to a trade show every year, and he would actually get buyers just by coming to the trade show. It was very interesting because he was personable, he was friendly, he was able to talk with people, and they opened up, and eventually he started getting orders. So you can also attend industry events, like when they have a workshop or conference, cocktails, go for those events, and that way you'll get connections. Government trade missions, if they're well organized, they will have the right companies present. Buyer missions, that's when buyers come from their country into your country, and they do a selected kind of speed dating arrangement where they come to your factory, they have a look, and they see where they want to get business with you. And of course, you can also be introduced by consultants. Most important, when you do get these kind of connections, please follow up. Send an email, you know what to do, make a phone call, and just make sure the relationship sustains. Next is about the next one, next slide. What happens when you have your buyer? What do you do next? Obviously, your buyer will have certain requirements. You've got to customize the product to his needs. Maybe you have to change the labels. Maybe you have to change the packaging. So you need to get that ready. You need to make sure the product conforms with these requirements. So look at your QC and your production. And last, of course, you need to look at logistics. How is the product going to get from A to B? And that's very, very important. Now, in terms of some of the requirements, if you're exporting under AGOA, I'll not go into too much detail, but suffice it to say that you do need to get familiar with these requirements. I'll just mention a few, some of the documents that you need if you're going to do an export shipment under AGOA, so that the person on the other side who receives the goods can actually claim the tariff benefits. You need an export entry from your originating country. So if you're in South Africa, from the government of South Africa, or whichever department is concerned. A commercial invoice describing the product, the quantity, the packing, and the value. A bill of lading is like the receipt you get from the shipping line or the airway. If it's in the airway, it's called an airway bill, airline. Packing list, which describes in detail the contents and how they're divided up into different boxes. And then a certificate of origin, stamped or authorized by the relevant government agency, which also contains the request to receive tariff preferences in the US under D for AGOA. So there's a section where the SPR must be indicated. And in the case of apparel, you must also have the apparel visa, which is a stamp put on, I think it's mainly the commercial invoice. Some people say it's on the certificate of origin, but there's a commercial invoice, the stamp is placed there, and that must be received in original on the side, US side, by the customs officer, so he can authorize duty-free release. On the other side, when the importer, next slide. On the other side, as the importer is coming to fetch his goods, he must have on hand several other products, goods, like the original commercial invoice. And if it's apparel, must have the stamp, certificate of origin, shipping papers to show how the article moved directly to the US from an AGOA eligible country, records to show how the materials were computed, and records showing the various costs involved. And suffice it to say, you must establish internal controls or internal procedures so that if the customs want to see the documents and you're the importer, you'll be able to show the documents to justify why you got tariff duty-free entry. So my last couple of slides is just to give you some resources, and we'll share these with you. Resources on trade shows, and then a couple of resources on, one resource on an end market study. And then we also have resources on some of these places you can go to for online information, some free and others not so free. So you can have a look at those, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, moderator. Thank you.